In the sweltering heat of July 2025, two men faced the ultimate penalty in the United States. Their crimes, committed decades ago, had left scars on families and communities, scars that time could not heal. Two death warrants were signed, two gurneys prepared, two lives extinguished. But what did these men do to end up on death row? And what unfolded in their final hours? This is the story of the executions that gripped a nation, a tale of vengeance, justice, and the weight of mortality. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more gripping crime stories. Leave a comment below. Where are you watching from? What's running through your mind as this case unfolds? Your thoughts matter. On July 15, 2025, in the humid air of Florida's execution chamber, Michael B. Bell took his last breath. At 54 years old, his life ended under the cold precision of lethal injection. But to understand why, we must travel back to a fateful night in 1993 when Bell was just 22, a young man whose rage would unravel two lives and seal his own fate. It was November 10, 1993, outside a Jacksonville bar called Club Christopher. The neon lights flickered, and the parking lot buzzed with laughter and music. Jimmy West, a 29-year-old mechanic with a warm smile, was leaving the bar with his friend Tameka Smith, a 24-year-old mother of two who worked as a hairstylist. Jimmy was known for his love of cars, often spending weekends tinkering in his garage, dreaming of opening his own shop. Tameka, a devoted mom, had a knack for making her clients feel beautiful, her salon chair a place of laughter and trust. Their lives were full of promise, but that night, they crossed paths with a man consumed by vengeance. Michael Bell had a score to settle. Earlier that evening, he'd clashed with a rival at the bar, a man he believed had disrespected him. Humiliated and seething, Bell left the club, but he didn't go far. He retrieved a handgun from his car, a .38 caliber revolver, and waited in the shadows of the parking lot. His target wasn't Jimmy or Tameka. They were strangers to him, but in his fury, they became collateral damage. As Jimmy and Tameka walked to their car, Bell mistook Jimmy for his rival. Without hesitation, he raised the gun and fired. The first bullet struck Jimmy in the chest, sending him crumbling to the pavement. Tameka screamed, turning to run, but Bell fired again, hitting her in the back. She fell beside Jimmy, her cries fading into the night. Bell fled, leaving behind two bodies and a trail of blood that would haunt Jacksonville. The crime scene was chaos. Police arrived to find Jimmy and Tameka lifeless, their blood pooling on the asphalt. Shell casings from a .38 revolver glinted under the streetlights, and witnesses described a young man in a dark jacket sprinting from the scene. The investigation moved swiftly. Detectives canvassed the bar, learning of Bell's earlier altercation. A bartender recalled seeing him arguing, his face twisted with anger. The breakthrough came when a witness identified Bell's car, a beat-up blue sedan, speeding away. Within 48 hours, police tracked Bell to a friend's apartment. When they knocked, he opened the door, his hands shaking. The revolver was found hidden under a mattress, its barrel still smelling of gunpowder. Ballistics confirmed it was the murder weapon. The evidence was overwhelming. In 1995, Michael Bell stood trial for 2 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecution painted a picture of a reckless, vengeful young man who killed without remorse. They presented the ballistics report, witness testimonies, and a chilling detail. Bell had bragged to a friend about taking care of business hours after the shooting. Bell's defense argued he was intoxicated and mistook Jimmy for someone else, claiming the killings weren't premeditated. But the jury didn't believe his story. After 6 hours of deliberation, they found him guilty. The penalty phase was emotional. Tameka's mother wept, clutching photos of her grandchildren, while Jimmy's brother spoke of a dream cut short. The jury sentenced Bell to death, a decision that would take 30 years to fulfill. Bell's appeals spanned decades. His lawyers argued ineffective counsel, claiming his trial attorney failed to challenge key witnesses. They also raised questions about racial bias in jury selection, as Bell, a black man, was tried by a predominantly white jury. In 2003, an appeal reached the Florida Supreme Court, which upheld the conviction but ordered a new sentencing hearing. In 2005, a second jury again chose death. Further appeals, including a 2020 claim of new witness recantations, were denied. As July 2025 approached, Bell's legal team filed a last-minute stay, citing concerns over the lethal injection drug's efficacy. The courts rejected it. Governor Ron DeSantis signed the death warrant, Bell's 8th under his administration that year. On July 15, 2025, at Florida State Prison, the execution process began. Lethal injection, Florida's primary method, is a 3-drug protocol: midazolam to sedate, vecuronium bromide to paralyze, and potassium chloride to stop the heart. At 6 p.m. Bell was strapped to a gurney in a sterile white-tiled chamber. IV lines were inserted into his arms, a process that took 20 minutes due to collapsed veins. Witnesses, including media and victims' families, sat behind a one-way glass. Bell's final meal, a shocking request: fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, and a slice of pecan pie, a meal that echoed the comfort foods of his childhood. At 6:08 p.m., the first drug flowed. Bell's chest rose and fell, his eyes fluttering shut. The second drug caused his breathing to slow, then stop. The third drug, potassium chloride, burned through his veins, though he showed no sign of pain. At 6:12 p.m., a doctor checked his pulse and declared him dead. Bell's final words were brief but heavy. "I'm sorry for the pain I caused. May God forgive me." Tameka's mother wept silently, while Jimmy's brother stared ahead, his face unreadable. The curtains closed, and the chamber fell silent. But Michael Bell's story was only half of July's grim tally. Another man, another crime, awaited the state's final judgment. On July 31st, 2025, Edward J. Zakrzewski II faced lethal injection for a crime so heinous it shocked even the most hardened investigators. At 60 years old, Zakrzewski's life ended in a sterile chamber. But what led him to this moment? What could drive a man to destroy his own family? The date was June 9, 1994. In the quiet coastal town of Mary Esther, Florida, Edward Zakrzewski, then 29, was a tech sergeant at Eglin Air Force Base, a man with a steady career and a family of 4. His wife, Sylvia, 34, was a dedicated homemaker who loved gardening and baking for her children, Edward, age 7, and Anna, age 5. Young Edward was a bright boy, always curious, with dreams of becoming a pilot like his father. Anna, with her infectious giggle, loved drawing pictures for her parents. To their neighbors, the Zakrzewskis seemed ordinary, but beneath the surface, their marriage was crumbling. Sylvia had confided in friends about her plans to file for divorce, tired of Edward's controlling nature. When their son called him at work that day to relay the news, something in Zakrzewski snapped. His response was cold and calculated. During his lunch break, Zakrzewski drove to a hardware store and bought a machete. Back home, he sharpened the blade, placed it alongside a crowbar and rope, and hid them around the house. He returned to work, even attended a college course that evening, as if nothing was amiss. But the evidence told a different story. That night, after sending Edward and Anna to watch TV, Zakrzewski attacked Sylvia in their living room. He struck her head repeatedly with the crowbar, the force splintering bone. As she gasped for air, he wrapped a rope around her neck, strangling her until she went limp. Thinking she was dead, he dragged her to the bathroom. Then, one by one, he called his children to brush their teeth. Edward came first, unaware of the horror awaiting him. Zakrzewski swung the machete, hacking at the boy's small frame. Anna followed, her tiny body no match for the blade. When Zakrzewski realized Sylvia was still alive, he turned the machete on her, striking her head and neck. He left all 3 bodies in the bathtub, their blood staining the tiles. Then he fled, driving to the airport and catching a flight to Hawaii. The crime scene was discovered 2 days later when a neighbor, worried about Sylvia's absence, alerted police. Officers entered the home to a scene of unimaginable horror. Sylvia, Edward, and Anna lay in the bathtub, their bodies mutilated. Blood coated the walls, and the machete, still wet, was found nearby. The investigation was immediate and intense. Neighbors reported Zakrzewski's erratic behavior, and one recalled him saying he'd kill his family before letting Sylvia leave him. Military records placed him at the base that day, but he'd vanished after the murders. A nationwide manhunt began, and 4 months later, the case aired on Unsolved Mysteries. Friends in Hawaii, where Zakrzewski was living under an assumed name, recognized him and tipped off authorities. He turned himself in, confessing to the killings in chilling detail. The evidence was overwhelming. The murder weapons, his confession, and flight records confirmed his guilt. In 1996, Zakrzewski pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. The trial focused on sentencing, with prosecutors arguing the killings were premeditated and brutal. They presented the machete, photos of the crime scene, and Zakrzewski's own words to police, where he admitted planning the attack. The defense claimed he acted in a fit of rage, overwhelmed by the divorce threat, and highlighted his military service and lack of prior violence. But the jury didn't believe his story. After deliberation, they voted 7-5 to recommend death for Sylvia and Edward's murders, and 6-6 for Anna's, which the judge overrode to impose a 3rd death sentence. The non-unanimous verdicts would later spark controversy, as Florida now requires at least an 8-4 vote for death penalties. Zakrzewski's appeals stretched nearly 3 decades. His lawyers argued the judge's override in Anna's case violated evolving standards of fairness, and that non-unanimous jury votes were unconstitutional. They also claimed mental health issues, citing his calm demeanor during the killings as evidence of a breakdown. In 2023, an appeal reached the Florida Supreme Court, which upheld the sentences, stating the judge's override was legal at the time. A final U.S. Supreme Court petition in July 2025, arguing Florida's outlier status and allowing non-unanimous death sentences, was denied. Governor Ron DeSantis, unmoved by pleas from death penalty opponents and Catholic bishops, signed the death warrant on July 1st, marking Zakrzewski as the 9th execution of 2020. On July 31, 2025, at 6 p.m., the execution process began at Florida State Prison. Lethal injection, the chosen method, followed the same 3-drug protocol used on Michael Bell: midazolam, vecuronium bromide, and potassium chloride.
Zakrzewski was strapped to the gurney, his arms secured with IV lines. Witnesses, including media and prison officials, watched from behind glass. No family members of Sylvia, Edward, or Anna attended, their absence a silent testament to their loss. Zakrzewski's final meal. A shocking request: fried pork chops, fried onions, potatoes, bacon, toast, root beer, ice cream, pie, and coffee. A feast that stood in stark contrast to the horror he inflicted. At 6:04 p.m., the drugs began to flow. Zakrzewski gasped a few times, his chest heaving, then stilled. His final words were haunting. "I want to thank the good people of the Sunshine State for killing me in the most cold and calculated, clean, humane, and efficient way possible. I have no complaints whatsoever." He then quoted Robert Frost stopping by Woods on a snowy evening, stopping midway, as if surrendering to the inevitable. By 6:13 p.m., a doctor pronounced him dead. Outside the prison, death penalty opponents held a prayer vigil, mourning not just Zakrzewski's victims but the cycle of violence they believed his execution continued. July 2025 left Florida with a record it hadn't seen since 1984. 9 executions in a single year, with 2 in 1 month. Michael Bell and Edward Zakrzewski, bound by their fates, left behind questions that linger still. Was justice served, or was vengeance merely cloaked in law? Their crimes etched in blood, and their punishments, carried out with clinical precision, remind us of the cost of retribution, a cost paid not just by the condemned, but by a society grappling with its own moral compass. What are your thoughts? Leave them in the comments.